Hello there, everyone. Thank you for joining us this evening. A big welcome to all of you. My name is Jasmine Allen, and I'm the director and curator of the Stained Glass Museum, which is a wonderful collection of stained glass housed in Ely Cathedral in Cambridgeshire. So, as you probably know, you're joining this evening for the first of our spring talks. And this season, we're doing something a little bit different. We're celebrating the exceptional art of glass. As a fascinating material, we're looking at its industrial heritage, the skills and ingenuity of contemporary glass artists, and also the place of glass in our built environment. And this series of talks has actually been organised to coincide with an exhibition that's currently on at 2 Temple Place in London called The Glass Heart, Art, Industry and Collaboration, for which the Stained Glass Museum has loaned some of its permanent collection. So thank you for joining. Tonight, we look at a spotlight on our glass heritage, and I'm really delighted that we have 3 speakers representing the 3 main centres of glass in the UK this evening. We have Julia Sunderland from the National Glass Centre in Sunderland, Julia Stephenson from the National Glass Centre in Sunderland, Peter Frost from the St Helens World of Glass, and also Harrison Davies from the Stourbridge Glass Museum. And we'll hear from them in that order. So before I introduce Julia, I just wanted to thank you all again for purchasing tickets for this evening's talk. All of the money from the tickets goes towards supporting the Stained Glass Museum, which is a small charity. And we're really excited to hear from our 3 speakers this evening and to think about these centres of glass together. I'm sure there's going to be lots of fruitful discussion. If you want to pop in the chat where you're joining us from, please do. The chat is open, you can use it, but we prefer, if you've got questions for our speakers, to put it in the Q&A function, which you should see at the bottom of your screen or top if you're in an iPad or mobile. Okay, so that's enough from me, I think, and I'm going to now introduce our speaker, our first speaker of this evening, Julia Stephenson, who is Head of Arts at National Glass Centre in Sunderland. Julia, please do turn your video on so that we can see you at this point. Good evening. So Julia is Head of Arts at National Glass Centre in Sunderland, and she has responsibility there for the exhibitions, the collections and the public learning and engagement programme. The National Glass Centre is owned by the University of Sunderland, and the artistic programme is overseen by Sunderland Culture. And I'm sure many of you will know the National Glass Centre. I believe it opened in the late 90s, so it's the kind of longest established institutions from those we're hearing from this evening. So Julia, over to you. Please do share your slides.
Hi, thank you very much for inviting me. If you can hear some really weird noise going on in the background, it's my puppy who's decided to start crying right now, which is great. So, can you all see the National Glass Centre logo? Yeah? Is that okay? Right. I'm going to try and start to stick to my allocated 15 minutes, so as not to run over anyone else's time. So I may zoom through some of these slides, but I'm very happy to share the presentation if that's helpful at the end. So National Glass Centre is in Sunderland. The history as to why National Glass Centre is in Sunderland, and I'm sure that Peter and Harrison would be able to give you many explanations as to why the National Glass Centre should be in St Helens or in Stourbridge, but for us it is because in 674 AD Saint Benedict Biscop brought glaziers over from Gaul in France and created the first known stained glass window in Britain. on the left, picture on the left is is St. Peter's Church now, and it did have the monastery attached. And the original piece is the tower. And on the right is an artwork created by contemporary artist Monster Chetwynd in collaboration with the team at National Glass Centre, showing St. Bede, the little character, entering the monastery at the age of 7 with St. Benedict Biscop. So just a little bit of introduction as to what we do. Please be quiet, puppy. So just to give you a little bit of geography as to sort of our connection with that very historic point of glass history. St. Peter's Church is here. You can go down the path across the car park, and National Glass Centre is just here. Our history there's more to our glass history than just the monastery. After the Reformation, glass production started in earnest in Sunderland, and we are on the banks of the River Wear, and which was a site that had a lot of bottle works along the riverside. After that, we had 2 main factories which produce glass. On the left is a gentleman who is blown for Hartley Woods. So we were one of the main providers of stained glass through Hartley Wood. And on the right is a production line for Pyrex. In 1922, a company called Joblins received the license to create Pyrex in Britain, and all the Pyrex provided throughout the Commonwealth, with the exception of Canada, was made in Sunderland until the late 90s. So in 1998, National Glass Centre opened. The original intention was that the back of house, which is all workshops, would be for Hartley Wood, but they went into liquidation in around about 2000, and the front would be a visitor centre. Sorry about that. The University of Sunderland stepped in when Hartley Wood went into liquidation, and have been running their glass and ceramics course from the building ever since then. And we are now owned and run by the University of Sunderland, with an organisation called Sunderland Culture overseeing our artistic programme to the public. Just a little bit on the learning programme that we offer. We have a really strong schools offer. Mostly primary, although we do have some secondary schools, but it's always quite difficult to get them out of school and on visits. But we do manage it. And recently we had a real success with secondary schools, because we worked on a project called Design Lab Nation with the Victoria and Albert Museum. And that was a collaboration between the V&A and a number of regional museums. And we managed to work with them for 4 years, engaging 3 high schools in the area every year. We also we work with an absolute wide range of people. So this was a program called Creative Age, which was targeted at people affected by dementia, so people who had the diagnosis and their supporters and carers. And we also have ceramics, as I said, in the building. And this lady here is Mary, who was our ceramics technician. She started a programme working with veterans in crisis in Sunderland. And this workshop was for veterans and their families. And she's now doing a PhD in relation to prescribed arts for health, which is something that we get quite involved with. One of the nice projects, we do a lot of one-off things with schools and families, and we did a glass prize exhibition just after the pandemic, and we also did a junior glass prize when we asked children to draw their idea of a happy creature. And then, much to the joy of the glass blowers who work in the glass centre, they selected, I think it was 5, and they created these are two examples, and they went on display, and then the children got to keep their pieces. It is an idea I totally pinched from Tacoma Museum of Glass. I can't claim it as my own, but it was really lovely. At the back of house, so that the non-visitor side of things, these are the courses, the academic programs that we run. And we've had some really fantastic staff. So for a while, we had Sylvie van den Hoek, who's now teaching in Belgium, and Jeffrey Sarmiento, who was a student as a PhD, but he was also a lecturer, and then became a reader, and then an associate professor, and then he left us and went to Canberra. So we've got quite a good back issue of staff. We also have a lot of visiting artists who come and support the program. So at the top, left to right, Che Kiriong, Martin Yannicki, Tobias Small, and on the bottom, Elliot Walker, Emma Woofenden, and Louis Thompson. And then some of our graduates, a lot of the work that we do, that we display in the public side, is made in the non-public side. So there's an awful lot of crossover. So this was a commission that we put to a PhD student when we were celebrating the anniversary of Pyrex being made in Sunderland. So she's a Sunderland girl, and she brought together Sunderland and Pyrex. So you can see the pattern at the top is very much Pyrex. The JAJ motif is James A. Joblin, who had the contract to make it. The insignia in the middle is Sunderland Football Club, and it's made in hot glass, lampwork, and water jet, and then fused. And she launched her collection of these glasses on a match day outing to the pub before the match. Helen Palin is one of our former PhD students. She did her PhD in recrafting waste, and we were really pleased that as part of the Design Lab Nation project, we managed to enable the V&A to acquire some of Helen's work that had been made at National Glass Centre. So that was a really fantastic thing for us and for Helen. Catherine Whiteman, who now teaches in New Zealand, so our reach is quite wide. And Sarah Blood, who teaches in, I think it's Alfred in New York State. So with our exhibition programme, we focus on artists who specialise in glass, and we promote and support them. And we also focus on artists who, for one reason or another, are interesting to us, and we enable them to explore the potential of glass because we have the studios within the building. So within recent years, we've done a retrospective of Erwin Eiche, which was just a fantastic experience. We've worked with Richard Meitner, Peter Stanicki, the De La Torre brothers, and Sylvia Levinson on the exhibitions that focus on those who specialise in glass, is just to give you some examples. And then this was one of the exhibitions that we did, or from one of the exhibitions, the men weren't in the exhibitions, where we invited contemporary jewellers to explore the potential of glass. These were two of our students at the time. And this is going back to the first slide where I showed you the Munster Chetwynd's work. We did a huge project bringing contemporary artists who don't specialise in glass to glass through the National Glass Centre, requiring them to undertake a new commission. So Munster Chetwynd created four installation pieces, and they were shown in Durham Cathedral. This is the Galilee Chapel. They're all about Bede and his writings, and it was just so amazing because the cathedral really accommodating, and this here is Bede's tomb, so it was just an absolutely amazing opportunity to be able to work with them and show glass in such a fantastic setting. We also, as part of the same project, work with the artist Katie Patterson. We asked one of our PhD graduates in lamp work to create these hourglasses. They were actually 15-minute glasses, because they would have had to have been huge to have been an hourglass. And the content is crushed meteor that predates the sun. So there's a lot of different sort of angles of looking at time through this piece. This was, again, part of the same project, an artist called Pascal Martin Theou, and this piece was called Colonial Ghost, and it looks at the connection, it's a more detailed picture, at the connection between the colonization of African countries in the 19th century and the introduction of Christianity. Really effective piece, and again, all of these pieces were made in-house. Most of our projects, I have to say, are led by a man called James Maskery, who's very well-respected artist working in glass himself, and also absolutely brilliant at facilitating other artists' projects. There are more than James, but James does an awful lot. And then the fourth in this series, and in this one big project that kind of, I think, took us a long way towards how do you facilitate other artists to work in glass, was by Ryan Gander. So he wanted to deliver an artwork within an existing shop in the centre of Sunderland. So this is opposite Primark on the main shopping street. And it went down really, really well. It was so interesting. He wanted to comment on the effects of today's society on how our high streets appear. So it's intended to be a redundant betting shop, where most of the features have been moved out or they've just been left where they are. And it's all in clear glass, water jet cut, lamp worked, hot glass, UV glued, sandblasted. Nearly killed us all, but it was really great. It's the bin, upturned bin, one-stop betting machine. Bag in the foreground and fire extinguishers in the background. And then almost everything that I've just shown you from the Irwin Ice slide onwards belongs to our collection. We started collecting only in 2016, so we only have around about 500 pieces, but it's growing, and I'm really pleased with it. It's a really important part of who we are and what we're doing now. And in 2022, a gentleman called Bernard Lloyd gave us his collection. And so most of it to date has been made in-house, and it's part of our program, but that now we have this donated collection. So some of the highlights from that are this piece of Pinot Signoretto, Dale Chihuly. Oh God, Marvin. We'll have to come back to that one because my brain's just gone blank. Harvey Littleton and Richard Marquis. It's a lovely piece. And that's me. I'm 14 minutes and 15 seconds, so I don't think I've stepped on anyone's toes.
Thank you, Julia. That was very much a whistle-stop tour, but brilliant. And if you could all park your questions or pop them in the Q&A now for later, we'll ask Julia to come back. Thank you, Julia, for that wonderful introduction to the National Glass Centre in Sunderland. Okay, so next up is Peter Frost, who is Executive Director at the St Helens World of Glass. And Peter joined the World of Glass in April 2021, right after COVID, so it was probably an interesting time to be joining. And he moved to the St Helens World of Glass from the higher education sector. He was for a long time head of faculty at a sixth form college, and he's also worked as a designer, journalist and writer. So Peter is going to introduce us to St Helens World of Glass. Over to you, Peter.
Right. There you go. Oh, thanks for having me. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a whistle-stop tour of the World of Glass. So as you say, we're based in St Helens, and that's got a rich industrial heritage. So we are all going to say that we're home to glassmaking, but we've got a good claim to be home of industrial glass. Cannington Shaw bottle makers were based here, Pilkington Glass, obviously, and United Glass Bottles. But in addition to that, we had at one time 17 collieries, rich in coal deposits here. We had Alkali Works with the Gamble Institute, Beecham's, Powders, and also Greenall's, the brewery. So there was an awful lot going on during the Industrial Revolution here. St Helens, you've probably never heard of us, but we're only 20 minutes from Liverpool. And interestingly, Liverpool's got the largest museum footfall outside of London, and we're 20 minutes from Manchester, so we're in between the two. We're still home to glass manufacture, so Pilkington's has got lots of sites still across the town. And really interestingly, we're home to a brand new facility called Glass Futures, which is a £50 million development. It's working internationally across the globe with education institutions and businesses in the attempt to make glass sustainable and environmentally friendly. So it's really, really exciting. It's literally just over the way from us. We work in partnership with them. They're a charity, we're a charity. So that's really, really exciting for the town. We're 5 minutes to the new Shakespeare North. And St Helens as a town is undergoing massive change at the moment. So here at the World of Glass, we were able to do a lot of work through Town Deal, which is a levelling up agenda from the government. And so there's big plans for the town. What we did as part of our museum development with this levelling up funding was redo our museum galleries, because we opened in the year 2000. We were a millennium project. It was quite remarkable that we were still going 20 years later, but it was definitely time to refresh them. So we tell the story through ordinary people of what it was like to work in an industrial town, through glass primarily, but also through the brewing industry and the coal industry, which of course were feeding the glass industry. So the coal was essential for the glass industry. And in fact, we tell our visitors that the bosses would turn a blind eye to the glassmakers drinking beer all day, because of course they sweated so much. It was such a hot environment that they were losing so many salts that water didn't cut it really, so they had to drink beer. So we've refreshed that. It tells individual stories. You can see to the left of the screen there, there's people, and they're telling you little stories. And then in the cabinets, there's artifacts from the factory days. We've made it far more interactive as well, so children can go in, they can hear stories in the pub from the glassmakers talking. We've hidden secrets around the gallery that you have to use special lenses to reveal, so children are able to say to the parents, hey, I know a fact that you don't. We've got a shop where you can go in and find out about the industrialization. There's things to smell and touch and discover. And there's the street I was telling you about with the ordinary people based in. We've got some beautiful figures in our collection that the men would have made at the end of the day. There's a Blackpool Tower there, and there's also a Ferris wheel, which is absolutely gorgeous. And then we really wanted to tell people about, we used to have a film show that explained how important glass was. But now we have a kind of a sciencey gallery, which we just call the Now Gallery. And this is where we're able to explain the uses for glass now, the structures of glass, and you can look through periscopes, telescopes, play with lenses. We've got the little boy there touching the buttons. That tells you about fiber optics. You can send messages down the line. In fact, I've got a little video to play you. Oh, don't want to do that again. So we've had fantastic feedback from the families visiting, the customers. There's really now something where children can really get engaged and enjoy the material that is glass. And I'll talk about this in a second, but we use natural glass as a way into our glass gallery, but that's going to come a little bit later. And then we've got a pretty big hot glass studio. So we do hot glass demonstrations every day. We normally do 2 a day, sometimes 3 a day. The hot glass studio has seating for about 100 people. We do commissions often. We just made the awards for the British Fashion Awards this year, which was really exciting. And then what we make in the demonstrations and what the glass blowers make goes out onto our shop for people to buy. We had a really lovely experience where the British Fashion Awards came up and they did brought a film crew up and filmed the making of the awards. It was a really, really nice experience. I won't play the whole thing for you, but it's great when you can get professionals involved and you can get really lovely images. And then this is sort of a view of our desk where our shop is, and those items go out on the shop. So we only sell glass that we make in the world of glass in our shop, and jewellery and bits of art. That's our hot glass studio. So we've got two heat chambers. We're still running a gas furnace. The gas bill is absolutely exceptional. And you can see there the viewing area. But it's probably one of the largest glass blowing studios in the UK. And the whole reason that the World of Glass is built on this site is because of the tank house and tunnels. So this is the place where William Windle Pilkington came up with the first continuous glassmaking process. And this was the regenerative furnace that he worked with Siemens in Germany on. It took years and years and years. It nearly sat Pilkington's under, cost millions, but he eventually perfected it in that building, which is a listed building. It's on the at-risk register at the moment. It needs quite a bit of work doing to it, but it's really, really important. Historic England say it's the finest example in the country. And this is where he replaced the pots and everything for a tank, and this made glass continuously night and day and would have glowed white hot actually. So our visitors can go in, have a look at the spaces, have a look at where the men would have made the glass originally, and then also explore the tunnels which would draw through producer gas, which is coal gas and air. So it was no, you couldn't call it environmentally friendly, but it was definitely energy efficient, the way Pilkington had managed to create window panes. And people love going through the tunnels, and this is where it would have drawn the producer gas in the air to make the furnaces burn hotter. There's only a section left of the tank house, but it's remarkable and it is really, really interesting. But it would have at one time stretched far across the bypass that runs behind it. And then, of course, we've got our glass gallery. And here we've got an incredible collection of glass, from the origins of glass all the way through to studio glass. We've got interactive stations for children to explore some of the objects in the collection. It's a really sort of, it's low lit, it just has a nice feeling, it's very rich and sumptuous. You can see our stained glass there as well. And you travel through, so we use natural glass, so volcanic glass, and glass formed by meteors as a way of coming into the glass gallery. And then you go from the origins of glass, Egyptian glass, Roman glass, all the way through to contemporary glass. That's kind of what it looks like, more the light levels. We've got some really nice pieces in the studio glass collection. You can probably all spot that Dale Chihuly there. And we were donated this piece recently. It's a Sabrina Camp piece, and it was made for Bookham Church. It's absolutely beautiful. So as the light comes through in the morning, it casts rays on the floor. And then we've recently acquired the Holford collection, which is a contemporary glass collection. This is only about 25% of Mark Halford's collection, but it's really lovely, and it's great to have in the world of glass. So it's got Le Perlier, Colin Reid, Richard Jackson, all the people you'd expect to be in there, several David Reekeys, but it's lovely. It's really nice having that, and that's what you see just before you go over the bridge to see the tank house. And that's the end of my presentation, so I think I've come in a little bit quicker, but thank you.
It's not a competition, guys. I know we all want to hear more from you, but it's really nice to also hear from three institutions together that are all about glass. So thank you, Peter. We'll ask you to come back in a moment. So our third and final speaker this evening is Harrison Davies. Harrison, hello. Harrison is curator of the Stourbridge Glass Museum, which is the most recent of all the institutions that we're talking about today because it only opened a couple of years ago. And Harrison joined actually in the year that it did open in 2022, which was also the year of the International Year of Glass. And he came to Stourbridge from Birmingham Museums Trust, where he worked as collections inventory assistant, specialising in Birmingham Museum and Art Gallery's historical collections and artworks. He has a degree in archaeology and ancient history, as well as an MA in conservation of the historic environment. So Harrison, over to you to tell us all about Stourbridge Glass Museum.
Well, thank you for having me as well. Here we go. Hopefully you can all see that. So I'm from Stourbridge Glass Museum, which, as has already been said, we're the new kids on the block, basically. We're very fortunate. It's not often that you hear about museums that are opening their doors. Normally it's a case of museums are closing and struggling. So we've been very fortunate with the amount of funding and community support that we've had. So I'm going to give you a little bit of an idea of what our site history is, where we sit in national glass history, and a little bit about the collection as well. So if you didn't know already, we're based in Stourbridge Glass Quarter, which is a large area in the Black Country. So there's this beautiful poem from Elihu Burritt, and it describes the Black Country as having been black by day and red by night. So this represented the black, the smog of industry, the coal, and then the red by night was the glow from the furnaces and from the glass cones. And this essentially is what inspired Tolkien's Mordor as well, that really kind of like hot, smoggy environment. The painting down the bottom left is one from our collection. It's a view from Dob Hill. And that is Wordsley, which is the town that we're based in the Glass Quarter. And you can see some of the glass cones along the canal there, all the different chimneys. We had up to 30 glass cones in the area. It was a particular kind of centre for glassmaking during the 19th century. This is partly due to the canal network being made. So we've got the Stourbridge 16-lock canal, which had really good connections to the ports. But we were also in a really unique position. So the Black Country is a UNESCO heritage site for geological importance. So we've got a really weird mixture where we've got 12-metre thick coal seams right at the surface, and then we've got really good sand, and we've got limestone caverns, and there's also fire clay. So it's everything you need for glass making, but also everything that you need to be able to make a cone and make pots as well. Our site is based on a former glass factory, and it did once have a cone, and it was a site that had two cones. The one is still in care of the council, and the one on our site, unfortunately, has been demolished. But hopefully you can see there's two pictures there. One of it in the early 20th century when it was having some restoration work. And the other one is a cutting from a 1939 newspaper where Stewart and Sons had decided to cap the cone, so cut it in half at the top, put a tin roof on there and use it as an air raid shelter. And then we've also got a Black Country flag, which has the colours, the black and the red, to represent that poem. And it's got a glass cone right in the centre there, and chain, which represents the women chain makers who did a lot for women's rights in the early 20th century. Now, our museum, although it might be only 2 years open, it actually has historic roots in Broadfield House Glass Museum. This was a council-owned museum, and they had an internationally significant collection that grew to 10,000 objects. Unfortunately, due to closure of the museums with some budget cuts, Broadfield House Glass Museum was one of the assets that they had to let go of, and the collection was going to go into storage. This caused a huge uproar in the community, who are very proud of their glassmaking heritage in the area. And so the British Glass Foundation formed, which is the charity behind the museum, and they agreed a 125-year loan of this 10,000 piece collection to be able to display it for the general public. So they got that in line, and then they had to find a site, and they decided to go for the site opposite the council's Red House Cone building, and decided to renovate the former Stuart Crystal factory. And you can see the state that it was in on the right. So while it was a grade 2 listed building, it was a factory unit. Many people didn't even realize what was there or its significance, but it was grade 2 listed, and it had an archaeological scheduled monument as well. And this is the site now. It's all been restored. So you can see right in the center there, we've got a footprint of a cone, that big circle, and in the middle there represented where the furnaces were. And you can see the Glass Museum. It's really modernly restored on the front, but as you're walking around the museum, you'll see where there's still 19th century tunnels, arched brickways, which represent the old floor plan of the factory. So it still has its historic elements where we've been able to retain them. And we've now put in a lovely modern lighting sculpture on the front, which sits right on top of where the furnace was. So it's sort of really put it back on the map as something new and exciting in the area. But as you can see in the bottom left-hand corner, we've still got all the kind of historic fabric of the building where we've been able to retain it. And we've even gone as far as to opening up our tunnels underneath. So we offer tunnel tours, and we do walking tours of the Glass Quarter, and we work quite closely with the other glass museums and heritage centres in the area. So you can see this beautiful view of the canal on the right-hand side there that shows you where the Red House Cone is, and we're just behind there. We have on-site demonstrators as well. So we've got a hot glass studio. We're very proud to say that Alistair Malcolm Glass, he's been with the museum since the Broadfield House days. So I can remember going and watching him at Broadfield House. And he's been a huge advocate and trustee of the museum. And he's now the first electric-based furnace and hot shop in the country. So he's getting international inquiries daily about what he's done. We're now putting solar panels on the roof of the museum, which will not only power the hot shop entirely, but it will also power the museum. So this is game-changing for us, as many glass artists, factories, museums are all struggling with their energy bills. So we've been very lucky to kind of get that kind of support to be able to put that in place. And see in the top centre there, that is one of Alistair's pieces that was on display at the British Biennale during the International Festival of Glass. And this is about to go and hang in our museum entrance hall. So this is an absolutely enormous emoji, which is made up of these individual glass tubes that create this beautiful mosaic effect. Under Alistair's studio, he has several different glass artists working for him, including Terry Malcolm, who does kiln form work. We've got Darren Weed in there. And you can see on the top right there, Madeline Hughes, who was a contestant on Netflix's Blown Away as well. So she's a well-renowned artist in her own right. Then got Terry College, who is a cameo engraver at the bottom left. Thomas Southall in the centre middle, who recently engraved the Crooked House pub that was demolished and due to be rebuilt. And then Chris Day, who is one of very few Black technical glassblowers in the UK, is one of our trustees and also demonstrates for us from time to time. Our gallery spaces are all set within the factory, so you can still see all the girders and the beams, but we have a contemporary gallery, we have a temporary exhibition area that changes twice a year, and we have historical galleries as well. The 10,000 items in the glass collection are constantly being added to with our new Stourbridge Glass Museum collection as well, but they represent everything from ancient glass. We've got a lot of 19th century Stourbridge glass. So the piece on the left side, that lovely Art Nouveau vase from Carter there. We've got a great selection of British factories as well, including large collections from Whitefriars, Stewart, Stephenson, Williams, all of the kind of the big names from the 20th century in Britain. So we've got that lovely drunken bricklayer vase in the centre. And then on the right-hand side, that represents a couple of pieces of vault vessels, which were the first items made using the new electric hot shot by Alistair & Co. Now, within our glass collection, I can't go without talking about Stourbridge Glass Museum and not mention Stourbridge Cameo. So this is definitely the kind of jewel in the crown of our museum. These are some pieces from Stephenson Williams here, that beautiful gird shape. And Cameo was something that was sort of reinvented in Stourbridge in the 19th century on our site. So Cameo, for those who don't know, is it's a blown glass form, which is then engraved, made by layering, casing different layers of glass. So here you can see the one on the left has an opaque white layer, a citron to rose layer on top of that, and a white over the top of that. Once you've got your layered glass, it's then covered in a resist on the areas that you'd like to keep a silhouette of what you'd like engraved on it. So usually it would have been beeswax and tallow, but nowadays it's done with a sticker. It's then acid dipped to reveal the colour underneath, and then it can be engraved with tools. So historically, this was done by these little steel pencils. These are called burls, and different items that were sort of hand created by individual artists. And this process could take months, years at a time. So there was a hefty price of Cameo. And Cameo art was only taught in really small groups. So this was taught at the Worsley School of Art locally. And there were only about 8 to 12 boys at any one time in a very short period of history. So we can usually quite often name certain Cameo artists by their style as well. So the piece on the left was something that was donated to us in my second week at the museum. And it was very instantly recognisable that it was a Joshua Hodgetts by the style of the leaves on there. We also have our contemporary Cameo collection. So here you can see Terry College at work, and she's no longer using those steel pens that we've just seen, but instead she's using a dentist drill. So not normally something we associate with anything nice at all, but here she is creating a contemporary classical Cameo. And she was the first woman to reproduce the Portland vase in glass in 2012. So you can come see the Portland vase exhibited in our contemporary gallery. And at the moment, she's also recreating another classical piece as well. So on the right-hand side there, you can see the Naples vase reproduction piece. She's about halfway through engraving this. So if you come within the next sort of year, you'll probably still see her working on this, as it's a very slow process and an absolutely enormous piece. Inside the galleries, we've also got a lot of interactors. So as well as having the glass demonstrators on site to show how the collection is made, we want people to have a go themselves. So we've got different glass blowing interactors, we've got designers. So we've got the 2 works that have been made on the top there. Those have been done by a school party that came along to visit us. So I think they've got quite talent there, really. And then you can see some young people visiting our museum and having a go themselves. So we're hoping that we can inspire the next generation of glass artists this way. Now, within this 10,000 item collection, we've been constantly bringing things down on site. So at the time of opening, I think we had a single item on every shelf, and now we're up to a few thousand items on display. So one of the collections that I was really keen to bring out and put on display was the largest known collection of Améric Walter Pat de Verglas animals. This is a fantastic French designer who created sort of different sort of things. So there's a pen tray down the bottom center there and a lot of little glass paperweights. But we draw from the collection and we use that to inspire our craft activities and offers. So we've done everything from nature walks that have been inspired by this collection to glass kiln fusing workshops. And that's really hopefully how we're going to go ahead, is, you know, drawing from the collection and seeing how we can inspire others. Now, within our collection, we have a Stourbridge Glass Museum collection as well, which we're constantly adding to. So we have a really active collecting policy. One of our first acquisitions was actually a commission piece, which was done for the opening of the museum. And it was this gigantic glass boat by Chris Day. So Chris Day is one of our trustees now, but this is well before this. So he was creating this during lockdown. He wanted to create a glass boat that represented his roots as a Black man. So included the colours of the flags of his heritage. But he also included the colours of the French flag to represent the Huguenots who came over from France with their glassmaking skills as well. And while he was creating this piece, he also added in more blues and yellows, and that was to represent when war broke out in Ukraine. He was so moved by that. And the base that it sat on with the concrete and the steel, that was inspired by the really unfortunate scenes he was seeing on TV at the time. Part of the materials he uses, he's got some lovely sort of videos out there explaining why he does what he does, and he's represented in museums across the country, so both V&A museums as well, but he really says it best, so I really encourage you to try and see Chris Day talk or go to see his exhibitions. But essentially he uses copper wiring and he blows into this to show the kind of the strain and the pressure that he personally feels like he's under as a Black man today in Britain. As well as contemporary pieces, we are also looking at developing our archives. So we have a really nationally significant glass archive collection, which includes dozens of pattern books from different glass factories. So we've got 67 Stevens and Williams pattern books. And recently we've been adding to that. So we've acquired the Richardson's patent from 1851. So it's alongside a certificate with 4 Richardsons from the Great Exhibition as well. And quite luckily, inside this lovely patent box, we found that there are architectural drawings for the bridge behind the museum as well. So really important, significant objects that if we hadn't acquired them, they might have been lost forever. So we're really lucky that we're able to get those. On the right-hand side, we've got some Whitefriars working drawing boards. So these are really thick cards. These are what are used in hot shops. They still use them today for scale. And these were 1960s, and they represent a lot of the Geoffrey Baxter designs here. So, and you can see they've got additional little notes on them. So this one says like, overlap the color when you're streaking it and don't just turn it in one direction. So there are all these little things that give us kind of a bit more insight into what was being done historically in these factories. They're all really filthy from having had a working life on a factory floor, but that's part of their historic value is in that as well. So we've really sympathetically conserved these. One of them even has a very rude poem from some of the glass blowers that were using them as well. And in our temporary exhibitions, we try to represent a real diverse range. So we've had everything from a 500-piece carnival glass exhibition to individual artists. And at the moment, we've got the Contemporary Pat of Air Association until the end of June. So the piece on the left is from an Australian artist called Emma Varga. It's called Firebush, which represents what she was seeing locally to her when there were wildfires in Australia. The one on the right-hand side, that has been donated to the museum's permanent collection. And that is both a mould and hand-carved set of deer bones. And they're near indistinguishable from the real thing. They're absolutely fascinating. We've got a piece on the left, which is by Tona Orvik. She was one of the people who helped contribute to a book on Pat of Air that was the foundation for this exhibition. So looking at the different processes. And this was a wax sculpt that was created called Refugee. So she created a series of portraits inspired by refugees that she was meeting. And this one's been purchased for the museum to go into the permanent collection as well. And then the final piece I want to talk to you about in this exhibition is on the right-hand side there. This has been created by a first-year university student at Wolverhampton University, which is where many of our local kind of glass stars have come from. Her name's Gemma Newey, and she's created thrown glass pots, which is the first time I've ever seen this been done, and they're executed beautifully. And she's donated a selection of these to the museum. So really exciting to see, you know, innovative things that are happening locally in glass still. So I've got my contact details here, but you can find us under Stourbridge Glass Museum and Stourbridge and Glass Museum UK online as well. Thank you very much for listening, and I'll hand back now.
Thank you, Harrison, for that introduction to Stourbridge Glass Museum. And Julia and Peter, do you want to come back so that we're all together? Because it's a great time for questions. If you do have questions for our speakers about their institutions and their work, please do pop them in the Q&A. I know that Peter may have to leave at 8 because he wins the prize for the longest day at work. He's still in his work office in St Helens and has to go by 8, I think. So it's a good time to ask him your questions now. While you're thinking of your questions, I will put some to the group. But firstly, before I do that, thank you again for kind of celebrating what is an extraordinary heritage in this country, and for showing us how all through all your institutions you're kind of keeping that alive for current generations and future generations too. And all three of you talked about the significance of your hot glass workshops and the fact that you can see demos on site and work closely with artists working with glass. And I wondered if you could talk a bit more about that relationship between the glass workshops and the actual museum experience. Feel free to just chip in as you like in whatever order.
I mean, on our end, it brings it all to life. I mean, to be able to have artists who can physically show someone how they're doing cameo engraving or how a copper wheel works, it really brings it to life. Otherwise, people just see it and they might assume that the cameo or the Portland vase is done the same as the Wedgwood pieces, where it's, you know, molded and transferred on, but actually somewhere sat there carving, and you can come back months later and the artist might still be working on the same piece, and that's quite a shock to some people. And, you know, seeing people in action is quite inspiring to young people as well, who are thinking about careers in glass and looking at studying it. And I think that's really special. Madeline Hughes, having been on that international platform, that's brought young people into the museum for us that might never have thought about it before as well. So yeah, it really opens it up and brings it all to life for us. Yeah.
For me, everything Harrison said is absolutely agree with. And you know, we also in working with different artists, it adds to the range of things, you know. So with the development of glass practice, one of the things we found when we bring in people who don't specialize in glasses, they really push our glassmakers, and not that they're in any way set in the ways, because they're absolutely not, but they'll ask very naive questions that then get the glassmakers to think, well, actually, how can I do that? And then in some ways the non-glass artists have changed the way that the glass artists practice. So the public engagement, absolutely, definitely. And we also have lampwork demonstrations both on the lathe and on the torch, which is really interesting. And like you say, Harrison, people I think, you know, haven't really thought about it, but they don't really you know the difference between different techniques. And one of the things you learn about glass is that you never all you learn is how much you don't know because it's such a huge field and it's such a beast of a material to work with as well. So I think having it in practice there is absolutely vital, and it's very exciting to be able to actually create artwork where you are and not just show it as a finished object.
Peter, if you're still there, do you want to say anything about that?
Yeah, I think my camera stopped working, has it? I can't see that I'm on, but can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Yeah, I don't know whether you've turned me off or I don't know what's happened, but yeah, it's absolutely crucial to what we do. So it's often the first port of call for people who've watched Blown Away or they're a little bit interested in, and you get them in, and then once they start, they engage with that process of watching the demonstration and the alchemy and the magic that is making glass. They then go around the museum and they just have more of an appreciation for this incredible art form. I think also what's lovely as well is it brings certainly the heritage bit, the industrial bit alive, because you know, once you say we've got a tour group in, and they'd watch the glass blowing demonstration, and then we would take them to the tank house, and after explaining the sort of the continuous glass making, and Pilkington's also came up with the float glass process, which is how they make glass today. And it's really interesting that they've just seen that what we've made goes into the annealing oven and will cool slowly overnight. But actually, over the road, nothing to do with us. We're a charity. Pilkington's is nothing to do with us, but there's a factory over the road from us, and they're putting the raw materials into to their factory. And 20 minutes later, there's plate glass on the back of a lorry. So it's annealed over a 20-minute period now. So it's really interesting. People are fascinated by the processes, and actually we make it traditionally, and we have to wait until tomorrow to see what people have made. And then also the other thing is we do experiences with the public. So they come in and they'll be blowing Easter eggs, or they make Valentine's gifts together, and that's really great as well. And those people come back and back and back again and start their collections. So I think once you get people to actually experience the making of glass, they're hooked on it forever.
Certainly, we find that at the Stained Glass Museum as well. And I have to say, it's not quite as exciting as open furnaces and hot glass, but with working with the glass in the kilns, both fused glass and the painting on glass, and people do get hooked and come back and back. And children as well, from as young as 8, you know, we see them come and grow up, really come into these workshops. And I think that experience of working with the material is so important. Like you said, Julia, so many people don't really have an understanding of what it is they're looking at and how it's made. And I confess, some of the objects you've all showed me tonight, you know, I couldn't tell you how they were made. And I think we all, in our own way, play a part in helping explain these techniques to people who are largely ignorant of this material that's now all around us. Right, we've got some questions coming in, so I'll stop asking my own questions and switch to the actual audience's questions. Adrian asks, as it's Women's History Month in March, what could or are your organisations doing to highlight women's history in glass? You don't all have to answer this question, but if you've got something to say about that, please feel free to.
I can, but Harrison, do you wanna go first, or shall I go first?
You go first.
Okay. So with the history at National Glass Centre, we sort of work from 1945 onwards, because we've got Sunderland Museum and Winter Gardens who look after the real proper history. But we do aim at all times, not just in on National Women's Day or a month, to ensure that we have a really equal approach in the way that we commission artists, with a particular emphasis on gender, but also all of the other equal opportunity definitions. But it was really, it's a really interesting art form to work in terms of gender. And when we received the Bernard Lloyd collection, I don't believe it was down to his collecting, but it was so interesting to look at the gender balance, because the Murano work was so male and so macho, and there was quite an interesting balance in the Scandinavian work, with in the sort of 50s and 60s, with some female artists coming through, not many. But then in the British collection of his that went from probably the 70s, so the sort of development of contemporary craft era, there was a lot of female artists coming through. And I think we've got better and better in contemporary practice in that gender balance. But it is something that we need to be quite conscious of. And I think glass, particularly hot glass, has for many years been quite a macho undertaking.
Yeah, we'd seen quite similarly in other collections around the world, but luckily the Stourbridge glass collection from the council was quite balanced in what has been collected. With part of the redisplays, though, one of the things that I wanted to make sure that was represented was women in glass. So to the temporary exhibitions that we've had on, we've had individual women artists. So we had Georgia Redpath, and she was doing her PhD at the time and using 3D technology. And then our inaugural exhibition when we opened, that was Vanessa Cutler, who's taught in glass and was pioneering some of the water jet cutting technologies as well. They're both still represented in our museum collections and on display. I've had students from the local university who've joined me in a project where we're doing a Women in Glass trail, which will be a permanent feature of the museum. And it will also be available digitally with video recordings that you can watch online as well. So it'll be really interactive and hopefully open it up for more people to kind of take an interest in women in glass, past, present, future. The temporary exhibitions where we've got multiple artists in it as well, we've tried to make sure that that's balanced both in terms of disciplines and gender and different identities. But we're also looking at our historic heritage in glass. So not just things like we've got our factory site was potentially owned and run by a woman in the 19th century. So I'm currently researching more into that, because if that's true, then that's, you know, the first time that's ever really been known to happen. So yeah, I'm trying to find concrete evidence for that at the moment, which is a lot more difficult than you'd think. And then we've also got some great collections. So we acquired collection from Isla Graham, who was a London antiques dealer. She was well renowned for people walking in and saying, if you went in and said, how much is that? She went, oh, you can't afford that. And she wouldn't be interested in doing business with them. But if you went in and asked how something was made, she'd be happy to tell you all about it and share her interests. So we've ended up acquiring this collection of her pieces, and we want to tell more about her as a person and, you know, women who dealt with and traded glass. And we've got a great collection and the original factory floor catalogue from Elizabeth Graydon Stannis's Grace Stanworks in London. So Art Deco female owned glass factory, which is really special. So that's something that I collect personally. So there's a bit of a bias myself there, but yeah, we've got great histories that are coming out of this for this Women in Glass trail. So yeah, you'll have to come along and see it, Adrian.
Peter, are you poised to go, or are you okay for a few more minutes?
On mute. There you go. On mute. Yeah, I will have to go in a moment. I've got to lock the building down, but yeah, probably not enough. But this year it was more a social history angle. So we had a series of talks about suffragettes in St Helens. So not particularly focused on the glass industry, but quite interestingly, when we do the industrial process, there's very, very interesting stories about women working in the factories and being the most exceptional crane drivers moving the glass. And we did a memory session for people in the town to come and reminisce about their times of working in the glass industry, or to tell the stories of their parents or whatever. And all the fellas said, quite interestingly, that they always felt safer if they had a female crane driver, because there was far less injuries. They were absolutely superb at moving the glass around the factory. And you don't think about that, but of course, these massive sheets of glass, which could take your arm off or take your head off, indeed. So the women were absolutely fantastic crane drivers.
Fantastic. Well, Peter, I know that you're on your way out. So one final question, which we'll put to you first and then go to everyone else, and feel free to leave at that point. And thank you again for participating.
Oh, it's been lovely. Thank you so much.
So what's the future for St Helens World of Glass?
I think it's a great one. We've turned a corner. We're getting taken a little bit more seriously. I think people are starting to see that this little part of the Northwest is absolutely passionate about glass. And not just the industrial process, but the beauty of glass. And we've got an incredible collection. So we house the Pilkington Glass collection. And as I say, it's got just amazing treasures. You know, it rivals the V&A. So we've got this beautiful glass collection. We're engaging with the public. We're doing fantastic educational work. and we just want to reach further now. So we want to become more of a centre for contemporary glass. We've got about 2,000 metres of temporary exhibition space. We've got conference facilities. So we definitely want to move more into that direction. And I guess the same reason why everyone else is here, we just want to get people passionate about glass. It's amazing. We want to change the public's buying habits. Nobody thinks anything of buying a beautiful painting, but let's buy a beautiful piece of glass and start collecting glass. So that's our mission.
Brilliant.
Thank you so much for having me, everyone.
Thank you, Peter. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll let you go, and I'm going to put the same question to the other panelists. So, Harrison, the future for Stourbridge Glass Museum, it's got quite only a couple of years so far since you've been open on your site, but I'm sure you've got lots planned for the future.
Yeah, we've been overwhelmed by our response. I think the amount of growth we've seen has surpassed anything that anyone had expected to begin with. People just really shocked when they come in. We've added more artists on site. As you probably saw from the photograph, it was a large site, but we net a lot of that out at the moment. We're looking at taking more of those areas over in future. We've got plans to build an on-site collection store, so the Stourbridge Glass collection will be coming on site, so there will be behind the scenes tours where you can see, you might not be able to see everything on display in the gallery, but you might be able to go and see, 10,000 items in store together in groups, which is a completely different experience than your normal museum, really. And yeah, we're hoping to be able to offer more things like we'd like to have an on-site archive kind of centre. We have a fantastic library, and we've got all of these pattern books that we want to make accessible for people. We're in the middle of a digitisation project as well, so we're going to be making all of our material online as well. So we just want to keep growing. We want to put on more temporary exhibitions as well that reflect what's being done up and down the country, and keep collecting and supporting artists as well. I think that's one of the most important things that we can do, is provide space for people, provide opportunities. So hopefully we can do more of that in the future as well. Yeah, thank you for having me as well.
Thanks, Harrison. And Julia, the same question to the National Glass Centre. I don't know whether you want to talk about the current plans, because I saw that there were calls for consultants' work about the future of the Sunderland Glass Centre.
Yeah. So we have some challenges. So our building is not going to be able to sustain our operation for very much longer. So we are going to have to move. And the papers, the call out that you saw is about what do we move to, what do we become, what do we want to be, how do we sustain it. So it's essentially part of the feasibility stage. So we are currently looking at a number of options. Sunderland City Council is building a new building called Culture House, and it's likely that we will have some really lovely gallery space in there, and then like say feasibility side for where else we can go and what can be developed. And also there's the university side of things, where the university in particular are looking at how do they relocate the requirements of the courses that we operate. So there's a lot of change coming. I hope that it can be good. I hope that it can be quite exciting. So a lot to watch out for.
And I know that we have got a couple of other questions in the Q&A, and perhaps I might ask our panelists to type in some answers or some places they can find answers, because they're about techniques. And it feels like with Peter gone and that last question, that it's a good place to formally conclude the webinar. So thank you to all of our expert speakers for giving their time this evening, and also for keeping to time, which is so important when you've got more than one person speaking. So thank you kindly for joining us this evening. I hope that you're all inspired to visit these places. Certainly those I haven't been for some time, I'll be going back to, and I'm also hoping to visit Stourbridge Glass Museum this summer. The last time I was there, the building was there, but they hadn't quite yet opened. So I'm excited to go back. I will just draw your attention to a couple of the next talks, and I'm grateful to Harrison for actually drawing attention to, sorry, I just shared the wrong slide. This is the Glass Heart exhibition in 2 Temple Place, London, which if you haven't visited, you should go to. And what I was trying to share was actually this one, which is our next week's talk. Has that changed? Next week, we actually are going to hear from 2 glass artists, both of whom have kind of connections to things that were discussed today. So Ayako Tani has done a great project around the history of Pyrex in Sunderland, and we'll be talking about her amazing lampwork glass. And Chris Day, who, as Harrison showed us, has producing some really interesting work about his identity and also our history as a kind of center of empire, really. So really going to be interesting to hear from them, and from a different perspective. So these are the artists who are working with this material day in, day out. So please join us for that talk. And then the following week, we will go back to something that's a bit more familiar for those of us who are stained glass museum friends, talking about architectural glass, but looking at architectural glass in contemporary architecture with Andrew Moore, who has written many books on this subject. So please do consider joining us for one or both of those talks. Tickets are still available. And thank you again to our speakers this evening. And thank you for supporting this talk series. Please consider joining the Friends of the Stained Glass Museum. If you're not already a friend, it's a great way of supporting our museum. And I'm sure that the other museums on the call also have similar organisations and support networks that you can join to show your support for glass heritage in the UK. And we will gather information like that to circulate after the event. So thank you to Peter, who's already left us, to Julia and to Harrison. Thank you all for your talks this evening. And thank you again, all of you, for joining us, and hope to see some of you next week. Good night.
Thank you very much.